Hello, everyone. My name is Bankole, and welcome to the show, Chain Letters, centered around the philanthropist and artist Danny Simmons, where each month we will feature one of his pieces that ties into the theme of the show. Today's show is centered around his painting, Three Brothers, which is a great title because today's guest is actually his brother, Russell Simmons. And we're ecstatic to have Russell on the show today. But before we bring Russell on, please, everyone, welcome the amazing Danny Simmons.
Hey, what's up, Bonk? How you doing, man?
What's up, D? I'm doing all right, man. How are you today?
All right, just chilling, just dealing with this pandemic and, painting and trying to keep my head above water,
Right.
It's good to be on, and it's good to see you, even if it ain't in the flesh, but,
Well, I'm down here and on the West Coast in LA trying to survive from the pandemic as well, but I'm doing okay, definitely. I'm excited about this show today and what we're doing in reference to these panels that we're putting together. As you know, our goal was to actually have an art show in Atlanta in November, but because of the pandemic, we're not able to do it. And I want to give a shout out to our partner, Denise Jackson of Town Culture Gallery, where we're presenting the show once we put it up. But before we actually are able to put up the show, we're going to do these monthly panels and invite special guests to come and talk with us. And the theme will be, of course, an individual painting of yours every single show. So today is fitting because, as I stated earlier, the painting that we're featuring today is called Three Brothers. Right? So
yeah, I mean, there it goes. See, this is one of the great things about these Zoom and socially distant online meetings. You can do all kinds of stuff. Now I can look at you and look at the painting at the same time, which is really cool. I really got into this painting. It didn't start out in my head as this landscape with these three orbs representing my brother. It started out more of a fully abstract painting, but or painting or collage or multimedia type thing. And what happened was I started thinking about the closeness and the spiritual closeness that me, Russell, and Joey have, and I decided to create something that's still abstract, but more representational of our bond as a family and brothers.
Okay, well, this is like the first African abstract piece that you had done in a long period of time, right?
Well, it's the first piece that I did. No, not at all. It's the first piece I did with representational figures in it. Those three golden things represent something tangible. Usually my paintings are a little more ethereal and they're just more abstract, but we can pinpoint at what this is about because I had an intention with these three things to talk about my family and my relationship, and also to talk about the things that we've created together. Right. I mean, we created, you mentioned my being a philanthropist, but really it was a family effort that started Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation. Mm-hmm. When we started in 1995, this is our 25th year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, man, it's amazing that I've been doing this thing for 25 years, programs, this and that. But yeah, this was the last the first one in maybe a decade, and the last one that I've done. So it's really kind of special.
Okay, and what's the size of this piece?
It's pretty big. It's 5 feet tall and 6 feet long.
Okay, all right.
60 by 72.
Well, I've been to your brother's house and his home and seen many of pieces from Warhol, Basquiat to your pieces and many others. And one thing that he had mentioned before was that a lot of people seem to migrate more to your pieces. So that's a testament to, how he feels about your pieces, right? And
when I go over there, I tend to migrate to the Warhol, Basquiat, but that's just me. But I think that there's something of me, of a lot of me, not just something, a lot of me in those paintings. And so I think the viewer can feel it, can feel the authenticity. My paintings are very original. They come from me. They're not takeoffs of anything anybody else has done. I'm sure that somebody else has done stuff like it, but it's nothing like, oh, I'm going to emulate that. This is all stuff that comes out of me. So I think when people look at it, they're able to see part of me and part of the spirituality that I try to place in these paintings.
Right. Okay. Well, you know what? We need to start the show. And of course, earlier today, we recorded a conversation with your brother, Russell, as he joined us from Bali. And it was very fascinating because you shared a lot about your lives. So we want to take this time and share this with our audience. How about that? What you think about that?
I think that's pretty cool. I enjoyed that conversation with Russell so much. This is the first time we've done something like this. Of course, through different media, we are able to see each other when we talk. Right. But to have a conversation just pointed about Rush and about the things that we've done and who we are as people, and we hadn't done before. So it was fun.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that being said, people, please enjoy the interview, the panel with Danny Simmons and his brother, Russell Simmons, Uncle Rush.
Peace.
Kind of grew up very lucky to escape. We grew up in the hood. We escaped. That's it. And a lot of our friends didn't. So I say that, but that has an influence on the art, I think.
It definitely did. I just want to we didn't grow up in a poor neighborhood, but we grew up in a neighborhood beset with the same things that poor neighborhoods had. Like most of our parents, all of our friends' parents went to work, this, that, and the other. They had jobs with the city or whatever they did. They had their own houses, cars, this and that. And so it wasn't the lack of financial resources these families had, but they flooded. I don't know who they are, but Hollis was flooded with heroin. And we didn't know. We used to go to the cleaners. We didn't go to the cleaners, bring our clothes to the cleaners, say, hey, Larry, blah, blah, blah. And in the back room, they were bringing in pounds and tons of heroin from Vietnam. So, but one of the things that I found out, that none of that heroin from that cleaners ever made it to the streets directly from there. It went to Harlem and then came back to Queens. They wouldn't sell it out of there or anything to that neighborhood because they didn't want to bring any heat on them. So it was exported to Harlem and places like that. And then the dealers would then send it to dealers out in Queens. So it wasn't a straight road out of the cleaners to the streets. It went around, but it came back to Hollis.
Right.
At that time, lower middle class communities were destroyed from what they could have been, and what the young people coming out of them could have been, in many cases, also got hurt. So it was part of the art. It was something that, and also, because we were so, I don't know, the choices we made and the choices most of our friends made, was influenced, I think, in part by culture and in part by everything, all the trappings.
Right.
So Danny escaped eventually. He went through. Maybe he wants to talk about some.
I don't care. I've been clean now for 26 years, but all of my friends. It would be an anomaly if any of my friends didn't use drugs.
I remember when I was in 8th grade, I didn't get high, and didn't get high didn't mean you didn't take Quaaludes or smoke weed or anything else. You could have sniffed dope and not get high. Get high simply meant did you shoot heroin. Everything else, don't get high.
No.
Right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Everything else was just like, recreation. Like, wasn't real. But out of all of my friends, maybe 3 of us, 4 of us, and there was a lot of us escaped to make it to this age. And some of them recently died from the abuses of our teen years and up into their 30s, who stopped 25 years ago. We just lost a friend who, because of his liver and his kidney, 25 years after he stopped using drugs, just failed on him because of drug use back then. One of the things that we had a really exceptional set of parents.
That's right.
That steered us, no matter what, towards creativity, towards independence, towards thinking about things. I mean, my father, besides working for the Board of Education, was a college professor who taught Black history. My mother taught children the arts, and my father was a poet. My mother was a painter, part-time, not like, full-time, but we grew up watching them do these creative endeavors. And my father would grab Russell and make him listen to poems and make me listen to poems that he wrote. And my mother would sit me down and paint. So all of this stuff like really rubbed off. So, I really need to say that our parental influence, even though it wasn't directly saying, saved us, it gave us a strong underpinning and background to know which direction we had to end up with. My grandmother once told my mother, when they were really worried about me when I was in trouble, even when I went to jail for drugs, it was like, don't worry about Danny. He's been taught well, he'll be fine in the end. Grandmas always know. And so it was no surprise to her when I came out of that period in my life. My parents never thought I would come out of it because they were living right with it. But my grandmother, like, you'll be fine. You'll be fine, because the basic moral structure that was built into and ethical structure that was built into our upbringing was there.
As much as that might be true, a lot of luck went into all of it.
Well, yeah,
my survival, a lot of luck. From the little fake gangs we were in, to the drugs we took, the amount of drugs that we took, to the selling of drugs that we did. We put ourselves in a lot of really awkward positions, and to be able to survive, for you to come out of jail after that time and then, reboot.
So, I mean, all of this has to deal with art, actually, because your environment, the way you grew up, it kind of influenced you, both of you, to create, what you did. And we must say, all three of you came out okay out of, the seriousness of the neighborhood. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, Russell, what was Danny's influence on you as a younger brother?
I want to say that Danny, and what Danny described as in our parents, my father, he came from a difficult place, and he really, although he was a poet and he was really, really artistic, he wanted a straight education and the mother, on the other hand, said, you'll be fine. Do what inspires you. My mother helped me and helped Danny to be free to be an artist. Danny's not afraid. People have fear, and they have they don't have the courage to go out and be an artist, and they don't have the freedom. And it comes from the heart, and it comes from the mother has to instill that. The father has to instill, the poetry, the art, to say you can go out and not worry about making a living and maybe survive. To quit school like I did and go out and just work as a music person before we had a hit, to put everything on the line and go out and do it. For Danny to paint and just walk away from his 9 to 5. That takes a little. It's not only courage. It's kind of, you have to be inspired to do that.
Encourage and encouragement, because my mother told me, and it's one of the greatest things ever. Russell and Joey had already started out in the music industry, and one of the greatest things, and I don't know if I was feeling a little jealous, but I knew I had more to offer than just going to work 9 to 5, and I expressed that to my mother, and she said, "Well, go ahead and quit your job and paint. Nobody will let you starve." And one of the things I need to bring out with is that there was a commitment from my family to make sure that I could do what I could do.
Right.
There was a strong commitment from my family. Now, I had already had a house that paid for itself, but in the beginning, Russell would subsidize a lot of the things that I needed. It's like when I started Rush, before Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation, we started an entity called Rush Fine Arts. Okay. And so when I got clean, Russell gave me $70,000 the first year to say, go ahead and try to start this art business. So we started Rush Fine Arts, and we got some paintings and movies and this and that and the other. And then he helped me open up a gallery and renovate my house into a gallery in Bed-Stuy. This is all part of the same commitment that came from my family. Go ahead and do what you do. Nobody will let you starve. We all got each other's back. And so my commitment back was to make sure that I stayed on point for now 26, going on 26 years with Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation, with never taking a salary and working every day towards giving something back to the community for what my family gave to me, gave me the opportunity to give something back to others.
Right.
So, I mean, it was a strong family ties that kept us together, that allowed us to go. And so, you know, Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation is a commitment of what we had to give. Russell gave his time, his friends, his influence. Joey started it out, giving a concert by Run DMC. And my commitment was to make sure we got the artists and the galleries and this going, and keep it going no matter what. And so we worked together.
Well, you know, and it shows that foundation, that family foundation shows not only when we talk about the three of you, but even your offsprings. Like, you seem like you're a very tight knit family, and you know, I commend you all for that. Now, in reference to the Rush Philanthropic Art Foundation, you mentioned that the first gallery was your home, and you know, Russell.
Well, that was pre-Rush. That was
pre-Rush. How did the
sanctuary gallery, and it was just, I turned my whole first floor of my house into an art gallery.
Nice.
That's all. It lasted for that was before I got clean. So it lasted for about a year, a little longer than a year, and then I went into rehab. And I never went back to that house, because part of the thing that my family made sure of was that I didn't go back to that neighborhood and back to my friends that were using drugs. And so they set me up in a loft in Williamsburg way back in the days. In 1992 was when I got clean, so I could stay away from my friends and drugs. And my commitment was, don't jump on the subway and go to Bed-Stuy.
Right.
My commitment was to stay my butt in Williamsburg and paint. So I stayed my butt in Williamsburg and painted.
Right.
But the loft was paid for by Russell. I didn't have $1,500 a month for a loft.
Right.
So Russell paid for that until I got on my feet. Russell said, here, we're going to make sure Danny stays clean. We're going to give him every opportunity that he could possibly have to make it. So it's more than luck. It's commitment.
Right.
That helped me get to where I'm at today.
Did you want to say something, Russell? Sounds like you wanted to.
Very generous testimony.
It's the truth. It ain't a testimony, it's the truth.
Oh, yeah. I'm saying, you know, yeah, I think Danny, you know, him being the artist, the poet that he already was, he always was, and sticking to it. You know, so many of my friends, like, you know, it doesn't matter who wants to help you. You want to shoot dope. And it's so hard for people to really escape, and they relapse and they fall back. And Danny never fell back.
Right.
Broke out of the rehab, and we smoked a bag of angel dust. He said, I'm never going to get high again. And he never. Is that right, Danny?
That's true. That's true. I said, I'll never do this again. And I never did. But let me just say this. Danny. All of that aside, it was art itself, the creation of art, and finding the spirituality in creating these paintings and writing this poetry and the creation of this foundation. It gave me a core of what my life should be like. Without all of that, no matter what I said to anybody, if I didn't find something to fill that need, they say that addiction is a spiritual disease more than a physical disease. If I didn't find anything to fill that spiritual part of myself that needed filling, which became painting, then none of this would have ever happened. But painting became what I gave up dope for art. But I substituted.
You know, we talked a lot about drugs. I've been sober for many, many years. I've been sober about 30 years myself.
Wow. Okay.
So, you know, I just stopped getting high. Everybody thought it was amazing, but I did. And, you know, and I found that it's clarity or cloudiness, right?
Right.
And either way, there's an empty mind. The idea of art promotes an empty mind, or, you know, music, all of it. And this empty mind is the consciousness that we're all working on in every instance. For everything we do, we're only looking for this more seconds of God's consciousness. I like to refer to it as yoga. more seconds of yoga. Every car you buy, all the sex you do, all the painting you do, to bring you to this moment. And so it's amazing that we were able to find more of it. And I found more of it through sobriety than through cloudiness. And so did Danny. So we're very lucky.
Yeah. Well, as you say, there might have been God's plan involved in this shit too.
Definitely God's plan, definitely. Now, going back to the question of Rush Arts, how did Rush Arts itself get started? What was the
Rush Arts got started really because I had gotten clean and went down to Soho and didn't see any artists of color on the walls. And so I said, well, there's a need here. Let me fill it. So I went to Russell once again, and we put art up on the wall of his first offices, which was Rush Management. And me and a guy named Howard McCaleb, he was a sculptor, and then I had a show. And then it grew from there. Then it went to that Rush Fine Arts thing. And then finally, I wasn't making any money at it. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start my own place and really start a nonprofit that promotes art. And I stopped trying to be an art dealer and said, I'm going to promote emerging artists. And Russell said, and we have to do something for kids. And I said, okay. And so we went to run and Eartha Kitt too. But we went to run and Eartha Kitt and said, we want to do a fundraiser to start an arts organization that helps emerging artists and children who don't have arts education.
Eartha Kitt and my brother performed at the Pup Building downtown.
Yep.
And we raised a significant enough amount of money to get started.
Eartha Kitt, wow.
And what we did was open a gallery in Chelsea and hired a couple of staff people and gave the rest away to organizations that were doing work. We didn't start doing the work with kids.
Okay.
And then we gave the rest of the money away to studio in a school, this one, that one, that one. Places all over the city. We found places all over the city that were working with children. That was, the African Poetry Theater. We all gave them grants. And we did that for a couple of years until it hit me that there were people living across 10th Avenue in Chelsea who never came to the galleries in the projects. And I went across the street to the projects and found a community center called Hudson Guild. And I talked to the director there and said, listen, I have a gallery. Can you bring your kids over here so we can meet the artists? And from there, we started bringing teachers to Hudson Guild, and then we started bringing Hudson Guild kids over to the gallery. We started a formal program. And then 23 years later, we're still teaching kids art. And we've taught thousands of kids. And we taught kids art from kindergarten all the way through college, who came back and taught kids. So we've done a tremendous job with reaching out to our community. Now we're in Philadelphia, and our mission has changed a little bit, but not much. We do the same thing, but the mission, more than just the artists and the kids, is community upliftment through the arts, which is a little different because we're mindful of the impact that our organization has on communities. We saw it in Brooklyn when I opened Corridor Gallery, how it changed that neighborhood. And so we're like, we're going to go in here and we're going to put this in here. And we're going to invite the community in. This is not just about artists and kids. You want the whole community to have us. And so in Philadelphia, that neighborhood doesn't have any other cultural resources. And so I picked that neighborhood because of that. There was nothing else over there. And so when it went down, and I bought a building and I opened it up, and the space, we have 2 galleries there now. One is dedicated to solo shows for artists, mostly from Philadelphia. The other one's group shows, and the smaller gallery is also our arts education space. And that's the brief history of where we had we do.
Well, I can say I'm a testament to, as far as Rush Arts is concerned, coming out of that space and having some shows myself through Derek Adams. Also, I remember the times that you would, let me do certain events in the space as well. And there are a lot of artists that have come in there as, like you stated, students, and gone to be great artists. And what you're doing in, well, everywhere that you've been, whether it's Manhattan, Brooklyn, wherever you set up, it seems like before you leave, you kind of make it a better place and then you move on. I see you're doing that in Philadelphia as well. So, okay, so now I'm gonna switch it to another subject, poetry, right? Because you're an avid writer, and you created, both of you created a show called Russell's Deaf Poets. Started off as a deaf poetry. So how did that show come about?
Can I start, Danny?
Yeah.
Danny came to me and said, do poetry. I laughed at him. And then Danny said, I'm going to show you some shit. And he brought black ice. And I couldn't believe it because, you know, when I thought of poetry, or stand-up poetry, I thought of, you know, finger snapping and so forth. But he came and showed me, he had a showcase. Right. And that showcase, Black Ice and another poet, there was probably 3 or 4. But 2 of them was so, you know, I was into hip hop, and, you know, it was a moment. Public Enemy was hot, and all of it was hardcore, and all of it, you know, the rhymes and the rhythm and the hand movements and all that culture was a certain evolving piece of poetry, right? But I never saw it connected to stand-up poetry without music until Danny showed me that. And that's when I knew that you can't do deaf poetry with, you know, or the idea that we connected on that level. He was able to show me a piece of that art. You know, James Bowen ain't deaf. He's great. The greatest black poets aren't deaf. They weren't, these guys were based in rhythm, and they had a certain part of them that appealed to the hip hop community. And then Danny brought that. And then he broadened it, of course, by bringing these poet laureates, all these great other poets to the scene. So we mixed it up. But we kept it interesting to the younger generation and to the new minds that were interested in a different kind of rhythm for their poetry.
You know, the gallery that Corridor Gallery, it started really, the second show that we had at the gallery in Tribeca called Annex. We did a month of different urban happenings. So one weekend it was poetry, one weekend it was film, one weekend it was fashion, one weekend it was painting, one weekend it was Black History Month of that year. And so we had all these urban poets in the gallery, and I did poetry, I wrote it, but I never performed it. And that was the start of thinking about poetry on a larger platform. And then I transferred that to Corridor Gallery in Brooklyn up on my roof. And then Bruce George came to me and said, Danny, we got to take poetry to the next level. We got to turn this into a TV show. And so we partnered, and basically I went to Russell because he had just finished Def Comedy, and it ended a year or so before. I said, let's do something called Def Poetry. It's exactly like Def Comedy, only thing, it's poetry. Same format, went down, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, nobody's going to hear. Then we took it around the country, and the office started getting millions of calls. When is Def Poetry coming out? And so then we did a showcase, and Russell sat down and listened, and Black Ice killed it. And then we brought in Stan Lathan. And Stan Lathan came to the Brooklyn Museum, and Sonia Sanchez made him cry. And from there on, we created a deck of poets, and we went to Richard Pepler at HBO, and he loved it. And we did another showcase for HBO people, and they gave us a spot at the Aspen Comedy Festival to see if it really had legs for the whole nation instead of just an urban thing. And so when we got to Aspen, it was the hottest ticket in Aspen. Everybody was there. Steven Spielberg, everybody in the world came waiting outside to see Def Poetry. And then we got 7 shows. Then we got 11 shows. And then it went on for seasons. We won a Peabody Award, and then we went to Broadway, we won a Tony Award. And now every once in a while I do a reunion show where we just did one at the Philadelphia Museum of Art where 700 people came. Poetry is a powerful vehicle. And it really, back to my father, our love of poetry, my love of poetry started with my dad, listening to him. And, and of course, I knew the Last Poets and all the Mary Baraka and Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni and all of those. But until I saw this new generation doing it, like Russell said, in ways that expanded its voice to the masses instead of to the intellectuals. When it expanded its voices to the masses, and the Last Poets were the first to really do this, but when it expanded further, it became not really a commercial product, but a product that could reach all America.
Commercial, right? Accessible, and you know, if it touches people's hearts, and it touches a broad number of people's hearts, it's not bad.
No, not at all.
But not, you know, a good commercial art is honest and may be original. It can also be very original and be good commercial art.
And that's what
commercial always implies to people that it's somehow
borrowed. Yeah.
No, it's evolved.
Right.
And it's maybe a feeling and maybe not the same thing. Like you make a commercial record, doesn't sound like any other record in the world, but suddenly it comes out and the whole world buys it. That's commercial. But it doesn't mean that it's, you know, it's using the same instrumentation. Doesn't mean it's using the same rhythm. Doesn't have to do any of the same anything. And that's what I think, you know, that's what good commercial, not all, it's all good if it's people like it, but that's really, you know, that's art.
Well, you know what?
Something original and free that came from someone, but it sounds different, feels different, and has its own way of touching everyone still.
Right. And let me chime into that. Like when you talk about the as far as commercials concerned, like you stated, like at first it wasn't commercial. There was a new style, a new vibe when you heard these particular poets. Like, you know, at that particular time, I was very close. Me and Black Ice were very tight. Matter of fact, he'd be over my spot in Manhattan talking to you, Russell, on the phone, talking about, you know, what you guys were doing. And also Bruce, I was, you know, tight with Bruce through Russell, and I had an opportunity to travel to some of the shows. These shows were not just regular poetry shows. These were like, it was like, they were like hip hop shows, but the people that were in the audience weren't necessarily hip hop, right? So, and they were like all different types of people. You know, when you go to a different city, it's like thousands of people coming to hear poetry. So you could tell how powerful, you know, this thing was. And it became commercial, I'd say, the style after HBO, which is a great thing. But then you notice that, you know, other poets started changing the
very
way
lucky.
Yeah,
another moment. Yeah,
exactly.
Transformation of culture. It was definitely, you know, through that vision that Danny had, that it transformed a lot. You know, a lot of thinking, and a lot of the artists were also more brilliant than the rappers, because silence is golden. You speaking in silence, you better say something. You know, no music, no loud music overtaking you, and you can't, you know, you can't fake it. You have to say something from the heart that they feel. Right. And I think that pushed the rappers' games up in many cases. A lot of rappers became much more thoughtful in many ways.
Yeah, so, poetry pushed them that they had to, because they people were out there saying stuff, and people were listening. They said, "Well, I got to come real." You know, it ain't all about this gangster stuff. It's about my real life. And, you know, and so
we always push for honesty, but, you know, you still, you know, but yeah, there's a lot of people who were not, they didn't last long. And most of the rappers who said things that weren't from their heart. But there's other parts of your heart that you have to explore, and poetry made them do it.
Right.
And then the HBO show, you had a prolific artist hosting the show, Mos Def.
Yeah.
You know, very prolific, and he was
a Brooklyn dude who I thought could reach across all boundaries.
Right.
You know, we were searching for somebody that could reach across all boundaries, and Mos Def hit the hip hop world, hit the poetry world.
Exactly.
He was the perfect person to grab. And he used to come to the gallery shows. He used to be here, there, and a lot of people knew him. And so he would not be unfamiliar across the board to hip hop or the poetry world. And so we grabbed him, and we wanted to make sure. And he killed it when he did his first.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
He killed it, and we had our host then. You know, he was. I have to say, he was the, like Def Comedy had Martin Lawrence. Mm-hmm. We had Mos Def.
Yeah. So we took some questions from fans of yours, and we only have time to ask one of them. And this question is from Virginia Brobin, and it's to Russell. Do you own any of your brother's pieces? And if so, which ones?
I don't have the name. I own a lot of pieces. I
Right.
own pieces from the collection.
He owns pieces from almost every period except for this new period.
I don't have many.
At time,
mostly everything is outside except the 5 bedrooms, and even then there's a lot of glass, so there's not a lot of art on the wall in this house. So the new city, I got new walls, but so I don't have a lot. But like we're talking about this particular piece, you know. So I will, but I've owned everything from the beginning. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first,
you've been to his house. All of his walls at least had one Danny Simmons on it.
One of my favorite pieces in his house of yours was the was it called The Last Supper, or what was it called?
The Last Supper is Renee Cox. I have that painting. Yeah.
That was Renee Cox. Why did I think that was your piece?
Of that iconic photograph?
You're in the piece. Okay, you're in the piece. Yeah.
Yeah. Renee Cox had me looking like Judas.
This is a powerful piece, but yeah, I'm familiar with the pieces that he had in his house. Definitely. Cool. So you know what? We're coming almost towards the end of the show. I have 2 more questions I want to ask. For the first one for both of you, what role does the artist play in our society? And when I say artist, I'm talking across the board: art, music, film, etc.
Well, I mean, there are 2 roles: to critique and through their artwork about what's going on in their own view of the world, and also to offer suggestions about how to change what they find wrong in the world. And all of that can be accomplished through their artwork. The other role is to speak from the art. There's an idea that I carry that we're all pretty much connected on one level. And when people speak honestly and truthfully from their heart, that people are able to connect to that truthfulness. And so when you do art that's very truthful, people, whether they agree with your truth or not, can perceive it, that you're being a truthful person. And so they are able to receive your message. Whether they agree with it or not, it's different. But the point is being able to put something out that somebody can receive. So I think that people need to be honest. Artists need to be honest with their thoughts, their views, and put it out fearlessly into the community. That's my answer.
To say what people don't have the courage to say or can't dig inside themselves to say. There's a truth a lot of times that is, because it's glossed over by socialization. Artists say what people are afraid to say all the time. So we have these, artists from the beginning till now have always expressed a truth that's overlooked by society because society is being socialized or made to think within what is the norm. And the norm people could go terribly wrong, whether it's, whether it's the Holocaust or what happened in Rwanda or happened. No artists ever agree the real artists look inside and inside of the answers. The people who are only thinking on the side of their brain that are socialized can get in a lot of trouble. The artists saved society throughout history. Have always been the ones who've spoken up against injustice and against cruelty and all those things. Those always the artist stands against that because they look inside and touch their heart and then they share it. Same thing Danny said.
Well, okay. The last question from the both of you. Tell me one thing that you appreciate about your brother and why. Who's gonna go first?
I like Danny for one of the things. I mean, I love both my brothers. Danny's the courageous one, and I think he said, you always want to get in trouble, so why don't you just leave things alone? Why do you have to, clean up this or clean up that? Danny's one of those people who will put himself on the line for others in a way that most people don't. And, he's willing to, stand up for what's right. And that's the artist in him breaking the rules. Like, I'm not going to just stand for, whether the okie doke, what I mean? The shit that we see all the time that, it's part of the norm. Danny's like, that's not right. And he has that courage, conviction.
Nice.
All right. What I love so many things about Russell. I mean, first of all, you know, we shared a room together. So, but the same thing about Courage and Conviction. He stepped out there and created stuff that changed the world. And you really have to admire the perseverance. I mean, we lived in a house together when this was being created. We bought a house together. That the drive, the singular vision, and the ability to follow through on it, and do it in a compassionate way to create avenues. And this whole hip hop game was dependent upon pathways that he started. People followed and did one amazing things, but he blazed the pathway for people and opened doors that other people might have been selfish about. But his whole thing was, you know, like they say he was commercial and the business exploitive, but he always made sure everybody was included. I love that. And that's, you know, that's one of the things. I mean, I could go on a lot of things personal.
You ain't got to go no more.
Right.
I'm good.
With that being said, I know your brother really appreciates you being here, Russell.
Thanks, Russ.
We all appreciate you being here.
No, it's my pleasure. No, listen, it was my pleasure. I mean, I literally, if I didn't have a call, I could talk to you guys for hours.
Right.
You know, I mean, share.
So I got to go.
Well, well, you know what? Go ahead and take care of your business. Once again, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much. It was my
pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Wow, that was an awesome show. If I don't say so myself, want to thank you all for watching this episode of Chain Letters. And like always, take time to view the art.